Thank you very much for the opportunity. Thank you, David, for being here today, and I would like to apologize for not being able to come last time, even though we agreed to do so. I think that as a minister, if you are called by your own boss, your own prime minister, then you have to go. But I am very happy to be here now. I would like to remind everyone of our old friendship, David Allah. When foreign ministerial meetings still made sense, we went through Brexit together. It was a rather painful period, but our relationship has remained since then. I have always valued this relationship because it is based on mutual respect, which is very rare in international politics these days, and I have to share this with you from experience. So there is no question that a huge paradigm shift is taking place in the world. In recent years, we have seen many occasions when a new world order is emerging, and we can say this without any exaggeration. This can be considered exciting because others have not had the opportunity to proclaim this for decades or even centuries. We have been able to declare this at least 3 times in the last 10 years, which is quite rare in world history. Parallel to the proclamation of the New World Order, the last 10 years have seen a lot of crises. It has been an era full of crises. If we look for a common point in these, none of them started from the economy, but in the end, they ended up in an economic crisis. A crisis, or at least they ended up in a new economic situation. They resulted in a new economic situation. One of these is illegal migration, which the European continent faced for the first time 10 years ago. Brexit also took place, and without interfering in internal affairs, for Hungary, rationally for Hungary, this created a bad situation. But I do not judge, because the fate of the British should be decided by the British. Nevertheless, for Hungary, it was unfortunate, because the discussions in the European Union between the federalist and sovereign forces became unbalanced with the withdrawal of the United Kingdom, since the sovereign camp was represented by the United Kingdom. The participants in this camp believe that the essence of the European Union is strong member state pillars, as opposed to the federalists who advocate a federal idea. And since the United Kingdom left the European Union, this discussion has not shifted to our advantage. The other crisis, the pandemic issue, the healthcare systems in European countries were struggling quite a bit. And at the end of that, we thought we could finally return to peaceful waters. Then the war broke out in our neighborhood. It has been going on for 3 years now. And as a Central European, you would think that in the 21st century. This is no longer the case in the 21st century, but such a war has been going on for 3 years. Well, all these processes, these factors, create an environment in which Hungary must be very cautious, but also determined in its foreign policy strategy. So I would like to take this time to give an overview of what we are doing and why, and to make sure that you understand our political strategy. I would like to lay 3 very important cornerstones, or at least corner flags, because we are at an important place in the history of football. The first corner flag is sovereignty. Sovereignty, perhaps, I don't need to explain this to you, because all of our history shows that we have always fought for our freedom. I can't even name a century, or even half a century, when Hungary didn't fight for freedom from necessity, against a giant power, a superpower. Well, so our history is dotted with freedom struggles, and it follows from this that we Hungarians are ready to represent ourselves, to stand up for our rights under any circumstances, regardless of who we are up against. And that's why I have to mention mutual respect in relation to David, because we always respect the opinions of others, and others represent their own national interests. But we expect the same from our negotiating partner, and we don't always get that. So we think that in order for international politics to be more peaceful, we need to return to the ground of mutual respect. The other is patriotism. When the Prime Minister asked me to be Foreign Minister in 2014, which has been quite a long time, he only gave me one guideline. Peter, implement a Hungarian foreign policy strategy. We are the 95th country in terms of population. Our total population is comparable to that of London. The number of people in the city and suburbs of London is perhaps equal to the number of Hungarians in the world. So in such circumstances, it is very important to stand up for ourselves. And such a country can only look at world historical events in a way that takes into account its own opinion, its own perspective. So we have to look at world events through our own lenses and from the perspective of others. And this is also a source of conflict, that we are ready to look at world events only in terms of our own interests. We do not want to behave differently. What does this mean in practice? For example, when we talk about migration, we can only consider the issue of migration as 400,000 people occupying Hungary who did not want to cooperate with the authorities. So we set up a 24-hour guard and put up a fence. Let's take the example of COVID, when Orbán von der Leyen signed the contract with different countries regarding vaccines. People died. The healthcare system was in crisis. We decided to buy vaccines from China and Russia. Of course, it was said that it contains chips and other poisons, but we don't need to explain this, because we received such vaccines and remained healthy. Then, if we take the issue of war, we have been shouting peace for 3 years now, and we are receiving huge attacks that we are puppets of the Kremlin's propaganda. Let's just say that this is a different issue, but now look at the miracle. Everyone is talking about the fire, and every member state is trying to protect itself from illegal migration. And because of this, we never get recognition that we were right in the past. But we can say about ourselves that we may be right now, but we will be right. The flag of the next corner is the recognition of realities in foreign policy strategies. We are a landlocked country. We don't have any energy resources. We are a country that can produce anything, with just our muscles and our brains. So that's what we need to focus on. So for us, the fine-tuned functioning of global trade is very important, because 85% of our GDP comes from exports. We attract investments from every single region, from all corners of the world, and for us, diplomacy must always be cooperative with trade and economic affairs. When I became the foreign minister, all economic affairs also started to be handled by my ministry. I am the Minister of Foreign Affairs and Trade. So it is important that I am also responsible for economic affairs, and this was a conscious step, because the order itself is very important. That I am interested in the economy first, not in the diplomatic receptions that we participate in. I am interested in Hungarian companies being successful abroad, and in as many investments as possible coming from a given country to Hungary. We are not big enough and rich enough to maintain a diplomatic service just to say something interesting and nice. We must be practical. We must be practical and pragmatic. And the fourth corner flag is Christianity.
Erre kell tehát koncentrálnunk. Számunkra tehát
We are a proud Christian state. We are a nation. We are proud to have a 1,000-year-old Christian state. Within this framework, we feel a responsibility towards Christian communities around the world. We insist on Christian values, on normality, and we also insist on, however I put it, we just insist on the common definitions that have existed for 1,000 years. Let's put it in a politically correct way, which is also rare these days. Well, to understand Hungary's foreign policy strategy, we need to understand the changes in the world. We are seeing huge political and economic changes. Let's look at the political ones first. This political change was clearly brought about by the decision of the American voters. Until now, the international liberal mainstream had dominated Europe, and we were very annoyed by this. We were fed up with it. The interference in our internal affairs, the education, and the judgment really bothered us. We were also confused. We were tired of the definition of democracy according to the liberal mainstream. That if a liberal party wins, then democracy is fine. But if a patriotic right-wing government comes to power, then democracy is in danger, and we reject this kind of definition. Similarly, freedom of the media is defined by the liberal definition, that if liberals dominate the media, then it is free. If conservatives dominate it, then it is not. We do not agree with these definitions. We are tired of them. So the fact that Trump became the president of the United States and goes against woke idealism and the liberal mainstream is a political development that we welcome and appreciate. You simply have to see how many resolutions the European Union has made against Hungary. In contrast, the European Union considers the Hungarian leadership to be a dictator, that there is a dictatorship going on here. But we have won 4 consecutive elections, with a huge majority. This means that people know who they are voting for. They know what they expect. It is not that they vote with a grain of salt. They know exactly what they can expect and what they got. And we have a huge majority now, 15. In the Hungarian parliament for years. And the liberal mainstream considers this a dictatorship, just because a patriotic Christian right-wing political leader is leading, controlling, which goes against the mainstream. So we have more discussions with this. We have many discussions with Brussels. And in Brussels, it doesn't work for someone to be right-wing and successful. Until now. The problem here in the European political world is to understand these challenges, to understand the changes. Well, we have to see that the European Union has isolated itself from global political actors. We are usually accused of isolating ourselves because we do not align with the position of Brussels. But the reality is that Brussels, the European Union policy, has isolated itself, for example, from President Trump, because they were competing with each other to say more bad things about Trump while he was president in his first term, and then during Biden's term. And it's not just that European politicians remember what they said, it's worse that Trump remembers it too. And the other thing is that we have isolated ourselves from Russia, whether we like it or not. There was a European Union economic growth model, a combination of Western technologies and easily accessible Eastern energy. This model, if you like, was successful, but it ended, and this model was not replaced by any alternative. So we closed this era, but we did not open a new one. Again, I'm not judging from a political perspective, I'm just describing the situation. Third, we have also isolated ourselves from China. The European Commission has imposed tariffs on the Chinese electric car industry, claiming that the interests of the European Union's car industry need to be protected, even though the car manufacturers asked Brussels not to do this. So here too, we have ended up in isolation, and the future is for them to represent their progressive program in the future as well. This is where the European Union is unfortunately going wrong. What is the Hungarian response? What is our response? We Hungarians lived under communist oppression for 40 years. So we know what it means to be oppressed by the East and abandoned by the West. We suffered this for 4 years, so we don't want the world to break into blocs again, but we see this. We regained our independence in 1990, a big change happened, and 35 years ago we seem to be returning to this, the blocs. We don't want this. As a small Central European country, we know that the losers of the bloc are the small countries, and we don't want to be on the losing side. We don't want to waste more decades of our lives. So we should promote connection, connectivity. And with this, I will conclude my thoughts. I would like to illustrate the practical outcome of this for you. The fact is, ladies and gentlemen, that Hungary has become a meeting point in the heart of Europe for investment from the East and the West. We are the only European country, and one of 3 countries in the world, where all 3 premium German car brands are present, with huge car manufacturing capacity, factories, and they are planning their electromobility strategy in Hungary. What was the result of this? China is also making record revenues. We are seeing 700 billion euros of Chinese electric car investment from China, mainly because of German car manufacturers, because they have shifted European car manufacturing towards electrification. They've invested huge sums of money. They're making fantastic electric cars. But the fuel for these, the batteries, come from China. So this is the Hungarian strategy. There's a huge German factory, and the next day a huge Chinese factory is built next door. Why? Well, they want to shorten the supply route, and they buy from each other. They supply each other. And when I listen to my German colleague, who is now slowly leaving office, and he talks about reducing risks and talking about isolation from Chinese industry, I sometimes ask the question, out loud or sometimes quietly, why is it that the CEOs of international companies call me every month to lure the Chinese here, as close as possible to them? So, taking into account the realities, taking into account economic independence, looking out in all geographical directions, is Hungary's strategy. We have followed this so far. I don't want to say that this is huge, and that this is not louder compared to the size of the country. But if I had only a minute to summarize the strategies, I would have done it in just 2 words, which means Hungary first. Thank you very much.